everybody. Welcome to Still the Mom's Faith, Freedom, and Healing interview. This is our March interview. I want to introduce you to David Kelley.
Hello.
This is the husband of Katie, which you guys hopefully listened to her interview for February. If you haven't, please listen to it. It was absolutely amazing. It was in 2 parts. So good, and I have a feeling that once David and I get into topic of conversation, you're probably going to see some similarities. You're going to see, obviously, because they're husband and wife, you're going to see that interconnection of their stories, and I'm very excited about that. That's why I'm glad, David, that you decided to say yes to this, because I'm like, sometimes guys are like, I don't know. But I love, because I really wanted the married couples as much as I could possibly do, because I love how the stories intertwine.
Yeah.
So, again, it's faith, freedom, and healing. So we're going to talk a little bit about all of that. And I always like to start with family. And so I want to know a little bit about your growing up family, if you'll just start there from a natural perspective.
Absolutely.
Great.
So, well, excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome.
And watched Katie's interview, and got a pretty high bar there. She's she's incredible. She's my better half, but anyway, I digress. But so family. Originally from Montgomery, Alabama. My family, for as long as I can remember, had been in Montgomery and kind of spread out. We're kind of in a triangle between Knoxville, Montgomery, and Atlanta, but primarily Montgomery area. And so originally from there, we moved to East Tennessee in 1991, just before I turned 8 years old. And just really found East Tennessee to be home. Fell in love with the mountains, fell in love with this area, really felt called to this area. And my mom and dad decided to come up on vacation, and 2 weeks later they're coming back looking for jobs.
Oh, wow.
So
wow.
Yeah, a little bit of a whirlwind. Even at 7 years old, I still very vividly remember being a part of that whole process and being excited and scared at the same time. But it was great. It was a great transition. This area really just feels like home, and even as a 7-year-old moving, it felt like home. And so grew up in Sevier County, in Sevierville, right at the foothills, really the entrance to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And grew up just loving the area, loving going up in the mountains. There's something magical about being up there and camping and exploring the great outdoors, if you will. And not to steam ahead here, but
go ahead.
Really just kind of fell in love with the Lord, doing a lot of those things.
I love that.
Grew up in a Christian family, and so I knew about Jesus, but found a lot of moments where I was up in these really amazing places where you have this 360 degree incredible view of just nature, and really just met Jesus up there. And
wow.
And so even as a young child, with our family here, just fell in love with this area, and thankful to be here. I don't think I would have found as much solace in Montgomery as we have.
There's a lot different history between Montgomery, Alabama, and Knoxville, Tennessee.
Much different.
Yeah, very different atmosphere, spiritually speaking.
Yeah.
So how old were you when you were in the mountains noticing God, and had you noticed him prior to that, or was this something new?
Yeah, so I had. We, like I said, grew up in the church, and so mom and dad, they made it a point to get out and camp and that sort of thing, even from a young age. So I would say, even at 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, is when I really started to notice the beauty. But I would say probably 12, 13, 14 is when I really started encountering the Lord up there.
Wow.
I was old enough to not just appreciate, how majestic the area is, but also understand like what went into creating it. And for me, just able to feel the presence of God in those areas too. And so early teenagers years, is when I really started, I would say, noticing a little bit more.
Love that, because not everybody, especially guys, and I think you're okay with me saying that, would be in touch and intuitive enough with, to me, that's your creative side coming out, your artistic creative. And I know a little bit about that, and we'll probably talk about that here in a bit. But for you to notice that at that age, to me, it was already God speaking and saying,
Right.
there's an artist within you.
Yeah.
That's what I hear.
Yeah, that's cool.
For sure. I wonder, so was there like a certain moment that you said yes to Jesus, or was it a process of
Oh,
saying yes?
That's a whole story in and of itself.
Yeah.
So, I growing up in the South,
yeah.
in Southern, I grew up in a Baptist church, and not speaking anything negative towards it. I'm very thankful
Yes.
for my upbringing, and just a lot of the things that I learned, and the people that I met, and really got to know Jesus on a personal level, through the church that I grew up in. But when I was 8 years old, we had a pastor come to the house, and he was introducing himself, and next thing I know, he's asking me to say a prayer with him, and I thought that I got saved in that moment. And, but didn't really understand what was going on. Fast forward a few years, meeting Jesus in the mountains, and I can't remember one specific moment where that started, but really just growing that relationship with him. But still, there was something missing.
Okay. Yeah.
Fast forward into my early 20s, I had gotten wrapped up in the party scene, and still had, this knowledge of Jesus, and still had a lot of feelings towards him, and have my conscience, which to me conscience has always been like Holy Spirit, just talking to me,
Right.
So still felt like I was a very good person, but was making a lot of really bad decisions. And we can dive into this a little bit more, but I had
If you'd like to, we sure can.
Sure. I had a situation arise when I was 20 years old that I think that moment in my life was the turning point. I had just experienced a lot of trauma. My grandmother, who was like my second mom, who lived with us growing up,
Oh, wow.
had suddenly passed away in her sleep. I wasn't in a place to where I could really truly grieve the way that I feel like I should grieve in a healthy way. And so I turned to alcohol instead. And in doing so, a buddy of mine asked me if I wanted to go out. And again, I'm 20 years old. I
Right.
have the fake ID, but know all the people in town, and so it's easy for me
to get through and get drinks at a bar, but had way too much to drink this one particular night, just trying to numb the pain, and just angry. Why did you take my grandmother away from me, this woman that I love so dearly?
Right.
And made a really bad decision. I was in Knoxville drinking, but I lived in Sevierville. So for people that are watching that aren't familiar with this area, it's about a 45 minutes to an hour drive away. Made the decision to drive home, way over the legal limit. Passed out at the wheel.
Oh,
I was
no.
about 5 minutes away from my house and passed out at the wheel. And there was a guy who had been in an argument with his girlfriend, and she had kicked him out of the car. And he's standing in the middle of the road, and as she's driving away, I come through and hit him
Oh, no.
with my vehicle.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so a whole long redemption story there.
Wow.
But God really poured out his grace over me. I mean, none of that is on my record.
Oh,
A police officer saw the whole thing happen. I was immediately arrested and taken to jail.
Wow.
But the guy survived by the grace of God.
Oh, I didn't want to ask, but
Yeah.
I'm so glad.
Me too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Me too. But in that moment, that was a very sobering moment.
Yeah.
I had pulled over because I knew I'd hit something. I thought I'd hit a mailbox. I had no idea I hit a person because I'd passed out.
Yeah.
And a police officer, like I said, saw the whole thing happen. Got medical assistance on the scene to help the guy, and then had another officer come and pull up behind me and turn their lights on. And in that moment, just went from being way over the legal limit to stone cold sober.
Wow.
Just like that.
Yeah.
And just scared, terrified of what was going to happen, thinking that, I could potentially be in a lot of trouble. And I just, I don't know. It was like this peace came over me. It was just like, felt the Lord saying, like, me, but lean into me through this. I got you.
Yeah.
And
I started leaning in, and I think that was a turning point in my life.
Yeah, because that's amazing to know that God, that's who God really is. That's who Father really is. He's not angry at us when we mess up. He's right there with us. So I love that you saw that and that he was that for you in that moment. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
yeah, it was incredible. And the next 6 months, going through the entire court process and everything, he just continued to ask me to lean in and just kept saying, trust me, trust me, trust me. And leaning in and trusting, in one of the scariest moments of my life. And he just came through every single time. Wow. So every court date that was set, something happened. And long story short, I'd originally been charged with a felony and 3 misdemeanors. All that got reduced to 1 misdemeanor. I didn't serve any jail time. Could have, because they tried to get me with vehicular assault and potentially trying to kill this guy, which I wasn't.
Right.
But there were a lot of people that were supportive of me through the process, and had about 250 people write letters to the DA's office and to the judge saying, this is not who David is. This is something that just happened because he was processing trauma, Lord just really guided through those letters and through the DA and through the judge this whole situation, and ended up not having to spend any time in jail, like I said, but spent 11 months and 29 days on probation, and I had 40 hours of community service. And my community service was public speaking to youth programs or youth groups and DARE programs about the dangers of alcohol in adolescence.
So was that your first experience with public speaking? Because we've all heard it. Number one fear.
Yeah.
Speaking in public.
It wasn't my first, but it was absolutely the most extensive. And I did. There were even prior to that. I'd been on stage a lot growing up, and prior to that, I would even get butterflies. And since then, no sweat.
Wow, that's amazing. So you said you had been on stage a lot, and I want to talk about that a little bit more, because I know you have a long history of being on stage, being in the public eye. You mentioned before we started recording, being on camera, that you're totally comfortable there. This is a side of you that I think I've known was there, but we've never really dived into it.
Sure.
I'm seeing a calling of God.
Yeah.
And so I want to talk about it a little bit more. So when you were a little boy, when did the on stage start, and what did it look like? And can you tell me just a little bit about that transition, even as far as you want to go? If you want to go up into today, that's fine. Just I want to hear a little bit more about that.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
So
as a child, I loved to sing, and so got in youth choirs. I remember in kindergarten, I had a role in a play with our kindergarten group. In first grade, we were still in Alabama. The school that I went to it was a K through 12 private school. My dad was on staff, and he knew some people there, and was very interested in helping me get into the music program, which this school had a great music program. But they would do musicals every year. And in first grade, I was cast as one of the Von Trapp kids in The Sound of Music.
Oh, neat.
And so I had a major role in this play, and it was, again, K through 12, and we had 3 different casts, so each cast would do two productions, and so I had the opportunity twice to do this play in front of the entire school and all their parents and whomever in the area wanted to come.
I love it.
And it was a lot of fun. Yeah. And I just kind of had this taste for it. I really enjoyed it, really wanted to do it more. And so when we moved here, The church that I grew up in, they had these summer camps, and part of the summer camp, it was a summer music camp, and they would do productions, and I would always have a role in that. And so being in chorus, doing that, played sports a lot. That's being on a stage as well.
Yeah.
Really thrived under pressure. I played baseball. I was the guy that always wanted to be up when the game was on the line. Like, let me go be at the plate when the game's on the line.
I love it.
And so just really enjoyed it, really loved it, thrived in that role. And as I got older in high school, played in a band, and we were the worship band for the youth group at my church. And so every Wednesday night for youth, we would lead worship, and started writing some original music, and even recorded a CD with them. So that was my first taste of recording.
Yeah.
But after the whole situation, this life-changing event with the DUI and coming through that, there was a group that really embraced me and didn't judge me for what had happened. And it was a dance group called Relentless, and that was in a time where a lot of people called it liturgical dance. I called it Christian dance and drama, and we did more like hip hop and interpretive, if you will.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'd never danced before, but had the opportunity to join those guys, and so joined them, and I was a part of that group for about 8 years. And we traveled all over the country, and we would go into inner cities and teach these kids how to dance as an alternative to drugs and alcohol and gang violence, and just had a blast, just an amazing time. And so that was on the heels of all this public speaking. And so the guy that was the leader of the group and myself were the two that would be the ones that were primarily speaking. Typically we would go in we'd travel on Friday morning, get there Friday night, have this big blast, thing where we call them like a youth blowout or something like that. And it was basically a big party, and we would dance and be real hyped up. And then on Saturdays we teach workshops all day.
Neat.
And then on Sunday we would come together. The kids would have an opportunity to share what they had learned, and then we would basically lead the worship service and share our hearts and what we're doing. And we did that for about 8 years. It was incredible.
Wow.
And then it progressed. Everybody was kind of growing up and starting families. I was still single before I met Katie.
Okay.
But still had this desire to play music, and had not quenched that yet. So
You can't quench a gift.
you can't. And so started playing music with this group, and we had a really successful run for about 5 or 6 years, and played in 2013, played 150 shows.
Wow.
All across the country that year, and actually played in Europe as well a few times. And
neat.
so got to do and see a lot of fun things. But
Still hasn't quenched that urge. It's still there. That desire is still there.
Well, I bless it in Jesus' name
Yeah.
that it's never quenched.
Yeah, it's never quenched. But I go back to that public speaking. That really was the launch pad for me. That community service. Lord's tricky little way of preparing me, right?
I know.
For
Yeah.
what He had for me.
Scripture says He turns all things around for our good.
Absolutely.
All things. And so,
Yep.
man, that's a big thread in your life that I'm seeing right now.
Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely. But goodness, that was the turning point for everything,
Yeah.
for leaning in and learning how to trust, but also on a very practical level, preparing me for what He had for me to do for over the next 18 years.
So we've talked about a lot of really actually life-altering kind of things happening so far.
Yeah.
The next life-altering thing I want to talk about, I want to dive into relationships a little bit.
Yeah.
Not relationships, but specifically
Specifically.
whatever you want to talk about,
Yeah.
but specifically I would love to hear how you and Katie met.
Oh, that's fun.
Good.
So Katie was my bank teller.
Really?
She was. She was. I was always a go through the drive-through kind of guy, and I had to go inside the bank this one specific day, and walked up to Katie's window, and I was like, "Oh, hello, this girl. How's it going?" And I had a check or something. I don't remember exactly what it was. Katie can tell you exactly what happened, I'm sure.
That's funny.
But I had a check or something that I needed like partially cash and partially deposited. And so I walk up and hand her the check, and I'm like, I need to do this. She goes, well, I need to see your ID. And I'm like, oh, sassy. Okay, well, it's in the car. Let me go get it. And so walked out to the car and got my ID, came back in, and there was a girl that actually worked there that I knew who was standing there when I came back. And, and I thought it was kind of funny in the moment because when I came back, this girl's name was Cammie, and she goes, oh, yeah, he's fine. You don't have to worry about IDing him ever. He's great. And so we had a little laugh about it, after that. But I noticed Katie in that moment. Mm-hmm. And so I became a go inside the bank kind of guy instead of
smart
going through
move.
the drive-thru. And so I would. I was serving tables, and so I had tip money. Mm-hmm. That I would deposit every day, just about. And so I had a good excuse to go into the bank every day. Mm-hmm. And over the course of the next year or so, became acquainted with her. Mm-hmm. And always wanted to ask her out, but never could get the courage to do so.
That's got to be so tough to be the guy, and you know that it's on you to do the asking. Oh, man.
It was. It was
Yeah.
very frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
And there would be days where I would sit in the car and be like, okay, I'm going to ask her out to coffee. I'm going to do this. And then I'd walk inside and somebody else would be standing there, and I'm like, well, I can't do it now, because that's awkward. What if she says no? That's embarrassing.
I love hearing this side of it because, as women, we don't always hear
Right.
the frustration and the struggle on your side of the
Right.
perspective there.
Right.
Yeah.
So there was one particular day, about a year later, where I was like, I'm going to do it today. No matter what, I'm going to ask her out. And I go in, and she's all excited. And I'm like, yeah, what's going on with you? And she goes, oh, I'm moving to Texas. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. It took me a year to get to this point to be able to ask you out, and now you're telling me you're moving. Great.
Wow.
Well, that's terrible.
Yeah.
So I asked her.
But you didn't say that.
I didn't say that, but I had been traveling a good bit at this point, and so I knew people in Texas, and so I asked her, where in Texas are you going? And she told me that she was moving to Fort Worth to go to ministry school. Mm-hmm. And I was like, great, I know people in the DFW area. Why don't you give me your number, and I'll hook you up with them? And she gave me her email address.
That's funny.
So,
she wasn't friend zoning you already, was she? Well, we don't know, but
I think there was an attempt to friend zone.
Okay.
But I'm very, very persistent.
I love it.
But anyway, so she gave me her email address, and I found her on Facebook through that, and we became Facebook friends. And it was probably about 6 months or so later, I get this random direct message from Facebook, or through Facebook, from her, and she had found my music on iTunes and had downloaded it, and just sent me this incredibly encouraging message talking about how she could hear my heart and the lyrics that I'd written. And
Wow.
she said, from one songwriter to another, I just want to say thank you for being bold and vulnerable
Wow.
in your songs. And the first thing I thought was, wow, that's really sweet. And the second thing I thought was, heck yeah, this girl finally
This is
She's
great.
finally noticed me.
Yeah.
Good.
And so that was June of 2012.
Mm-hmm.
And in August of 2012, she sends me another message and says, hey, I'm going to be in town with my friend. Would love to, come see a show if you guys happen to be playing. And so I asked her what the date was, or what the dates were, rather, that she was going to be in town. And she told me it was going to be August, we'll say, I don't know, 12th through the 20th or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I mentioned before, we were playing about 150 shows a year.
Mm-hmm.
What I didn't tell you is only 2 of those shows typically were in Knoxville.
Okay.
This specific year, one of those happened to be while she was in town.
Interesting.
And so I invited her to come, and we coordinated it. We got her to the show, and we played a show. But this particular show, I happened to be sharing my story and giving my testimony.
Oh, wow.
And so she got to hear my heart during that show too, something that she had not heard, just from 5-minute conversations and interactions at the bank. And we ended up hanging out that night after the show, and really, long story short, ended up staying up talking all night long until about 7 o'clock in the morning. And that was August 19th of 2012, and here we are 10 years later almost.
Yeah.
And haven't gone a day without talking to her since.
Wow, that's amazing.
And so she went back to Texas. We started dating long distance for 9 months, which was really tough.
Yeah.
But I'm really thankful for that long distance period, dating period, because all we had was conversation. And so we really, there was no, let's go to the movies or let's go do these fun things. It was, let's talk. And, we really got to know one another.
Yeah,
and,
that's good.
She's a beautiful woman, but
I agree with you.
But I really got to see how beautiful her heart was in that 9 months, and
Yeah.
fell in love with her, and then in November of 2014 got married.
I love it.
Just a couple years later.
I love it.
Yeah.
So I think you've told me your story, and of course we've heard Katie's story. If anybody has listened to that, and now the stories have converged,
Yeah.
and so she's been in ministry school, and she's got things that the Lord is teaching her and showing her about who she is. And you've talked a ton about, just from childhood, even the things that the Lord has been doing in your life. And now those two things have come together. And so when you came together, did you start to notice a partnership in that, or a shift in what God was doing? Was there anything, was it enhanced? I'm guessing it probably was, but was there anything that you noticed as your two stories came together?
Yeah. So
While she was in ministry school and we were dating long distance, I think it really started then. Her experience with school, it was so neat to me, because a lot of our conversations, she was talking about the things that she was learning, what the Lord was doing, and so I'm just getting fed all from her. It was like everything that was going on in the school was being funneled through her, and I'm just soaking it all up. And so so there was a lot of the teachings and the things that she had learned that I was completely on board with.
Oh, good.
And most of it, honestly. And so, we were very like-minded. We really believed the same way, and really just learned to anticipate and trust in the Lord the same way.
Good.
For me, it had started, years prior. For her, I think it was something that she had probably grown up with, even probably a little bit more than I did. And so it was an inherent thing, I believe, really for both of us. But there was this enhancement, but even within the enhancement, I think there was a lot of tension.
Okay.
Because, there were things that she had learned that I had heard, but didn't really truly learn.
Do you have one or two specifics that you want to mention?
Oh
on
goodness!
that? I know I'm putting you on the spot, so
Sure.
if you need like a second to think.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there. Okay, so there were maybe not even like very specifically on a spiritual level, but just on a relational level, between us. Learning to give each other space when needed. I've always been the one that's like, been very caring and like, wanted to take care of her, being the man of the house. I think that's just something that we organically want to do and inherently want to do. And there were times where, we would have a bit of an argument or a misunderstanding, and maybe I missed something that she said, because I do get focused on things from time to time, and she would just need a minute to process it, and I would be like, no, tell me what's going on, like let's get through this thing. And so learning the balance, on a spiritual level. She had been through this incredible, ministry school experience.
Right.
I had felt like I went through it, but there were a lot of things that, you know, I wasn't able to truly grasp because I wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
But also, with my upbringing,
Mm-hmm.
you know, there wasn't a lot of talk about, you know, how to lead in the house
Mm-hmm.
as a man,
Yeah.
and how to, you know, on a spiritual level, like really nurture your family.
Right.
And so I was missing the boat there a lot. And so there were a lot of expectations, you know, to no fault of anyone.
No.
But there was an expectation of what that should look like and things that I should be doing that I was
Sure.
falling short. And so there was a growing period for me for a number of years. I mean,
Mhm.
even up until, even now.
Yeah.
There's, you know,
Of course.
not
right,
even up
for all
until,
of
I
us.
mean, even now,
Sure.
you know, I'm still learning. And, you know, so there were a lot of enhancements, but, you know, and I think that us coming together was incredibly powerful.
Good.
You know, and the Lord has really done a lot of really cool things in us and through us. You know, not just within our household, but, you know, in our community, in our family,
Mm-hmm.
in our city. But there are still, you know, times where it's like, we need to
Of course. Right.
reevaluate and figure this thing out.